Hello, my name is Sasha. I'm with Arminco Inc. Arminco Inc. is a construction, design, architecture, and total project management firm dedicated to the dental industry across the United States. I happen to be part of the architecture and design team, a team of actually about 10 people. And purpose of today's presentation is to try to give you guys enough information for when you're looking for a new space, you're looking to move. It might even help you if you're looking to remodel because you know what you're looking for. So let's jump right into it. So we're going to start with talking about the biggest question that I get. I get this from lunch and learns that I teach, from the colleges that I go to, from uh, doctors who've been practicing for 10 years. They always ask, they would love to ask, is it better to buy a space or rent a space? It's a very common question. I mean, obviously, we all would love to own. It's an investment. You're not just paying someone to pay off their investment. In the ideal world, we'd all own. But there are many factors actually which affect whether buying or leasing makes more sense. I wish I could tell you that there's a secret key, but really the only short and constant answer, especially for dentistry that requires walk-ins, not so much the specialties, but location is everything. What that means is if you had let's say a plot of land for sale in the middle of nowhere in a population, a small population area that was for sale, and you had a lease in, let's say, a retail center, lots of neighborhoods around, a lot of families around, lots of people are able to find you quickly. In that situation, I'd always push the client towards the lease. So it just depends on location, the amount of people in and around the area. So when it comes to if you're trying to figure it out between two spaces and you've got one space for sale and one space for lease, and you can do a demographic study or you can have an expert prepare a demographic study, which is a demographic study is basically somebody takes a radius of the area you're looking at and is an expert in the dental industry who knows just how many potential patients there are and how much potential competition there is. So basically, if you can do a demographic study and it makes more sense to be in the lease because of the location, then I would always press for the lease over the purchase because we want people to find you. We want patients. We want patients. If you're a GP, we want patients coming back. If you're a pedo, you want it to be comfortable for the parents and easy for the parents to find you. Even the orthos. I mean, we don't have returning patients per se with orthos, but we want people that find you easily and like, this is my orthodontist, I'm going to go with them. Convenience is a big thing for decision making for a lot of people. So how location affects each specialty is something that I like to touch on a little bit. Obviously, if you're an oral surgeon, you're not going to get a lot of walk-ins, and if you are, that's amazing. We're not going to stop those walk-ins, but as an oral surgeon, you're not going to get a ton of walk-ins. So your focus is going to be around trying to be around general dentists and being around a lot of potential referral sources. So an oral surgeon might not be necessarily in a popular shopping center, but might be in, for example, a multi-story building that's near a lot of dentists, which have a lot of exposure. So one of my bullet points actually says location affects general dentistry and specialty dentistry differently. It does. It does in a sense. So mainly being that general dentist, pedodontist, even orthodontists, they want to have as much. They want people to find them as quickly as possible. They want a lot of foot traffic in or around them. They want signage. So you get a good lease, a good location, you get a big sign, you've already done a big chunk of your marketing without having to spend anything more than just the signing the lease. So something that's important that's on the top right of this screen, I actually kind of stamped it throughout a couple of these slides, I think two. Commercial real estate is customizable. That's going to come up over and over. It is nothing like residential real estate. Residential real estate, you find a house, you make an offer, then you either get a counter offer or they accept the offer, and then it goes to closing. Commercial real estate, no two deals are exactly the same. Even in the same building and spaces right next to each other, no two deals are the same. And I'm going to keep coming back to this, but the one thing I want you guys, if nothing else you don't take from these two slides, just remember, commercial real estate is customizable and negotiable, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, I added these fun pictures just so it wouldn't be a bunch of boring words. These are offices we've completed. General dentist on the left, pedodontist on the right. Continuing on with real estate, purchasing versus leasing. One thing with purchasing, let's start there. So before we go to leasing, we're going to focus on purchasing for a minute. When it comes to purchasing a piece of property, I myself, as part of the architectural team, I'm sent out there often to check out buildings. When you purchase a space, even a piece of land, you're purchasing the space in as-is condition. What that means is if you are looking at an older space, let's say you're in a city, you're in New York, DC, and you're looking at an old building, and your thought is, wow, this is a great location, but your second thought should be, I got to get a contractor who's knowledgeable, or at least an architect out there. Ideally, both. If you have a design build like us, where kind of everything is in-house and they can check everything out, that's the ideal situation. But you want to get someone out there, because just because I might go out there and tell you, hey, the HVAC is weak or it's old, the seller is rarely, it's possible, it's very possible. Like I said, commercial real estate is customizable, but it's very rare that they will offer to replace it or cover the cost. They might lower the cost by a little bit, but property is sold as is. So once you purchase a property, or once you at least have the intentions of purchasing a property, you enter into something called a study period. This is critical. This is not like in residential where you have a home inspector come and look at your home and they tell you, hey, a couple of the plugs in the bathrooms aren't working. A study period is when someone like me goes into the space, not only just looks at the electrical. So with dentistry, one thing that's critical is we need to have a certain amount of electrical for current and future equipment. That means panel machines, imaging, any imaging machines in general, dental chairs, vacuuming compressors, all that fun stuff. Mechanical, which is your HVAC. Another thing that's critical with all types of dentistry, you're going to have a lot of rooms. Even pedo and ortho, you guys tend to have open base. Those open, you're still going to have closed rooms, consultations, employee break rooms, windows. HVAC control is critical, and having the correct amount of CFMs, and we'll talk a little bit at the end here what that means. CFMs is just, basically in layman's terms, how much air is being pumped into the space by the machine. You want to have a correct amount so that your patients aren't, on a hot day, your patients aren't freezing in the operatories because you're pumping the AC, but then your employees are, your patients are warm because of the window line, and you're forced to pump the AC, which causes your break room and your waiting room to be freezing because they're not on the window line. I get doctors all the time who will call me and say, hey, my operatories are 7 to 10 degrees more. What can I do about it? It's because the AC wasn't set up properly. And then plumbing. This is another thing. Dentistry, we got a lot of plumbing. Every specialty has plumbing. I don't care if you're a one exam room, one surgical suite, oral surgery office, you're still going to have a certain amount of plumbing because we have air. It's not just plumbing, water, and sewage lines. We're talking air, vacuum, and sometimes sedation-related lines. So when you're checking out a space during the study period, you need an expert not to just check out that these utilities I mentioned are working. You need them to confirm that the zoning that a dental office can be in that space. It's zoned properly for dental office. I run into nightmares all the time where a doctor will find a space, bring me in, then I come to find out it's zoned residential or it's zoned retail commercial. It's not necessarily medical zoned. So you want someone to check the zoning. You want someone to check the utilities. The study periods are genuinely 60 days. I've seen 100 days. I'm dealing with one right now that happens to be 30 days. It just depends on the seller, but because commercial real estate is customizable, you should fight to at least get a 60-day study period, because there are cases where I need to do, or an architect needs to do, or even a GC needs to do a certain amount of paperwork with the county to make sure, let's say we're not sure if zoning needs to go through. The only way to confirm is I've got to deal with the county. That can take 2 to 3 weeks. And if we don't do this study and you end up buying the space, again, you're buying it as is. The seller doesn't care if you can never put a dental office in there. Now you've just got this investment property and you're going to have to figure it out while you're also looking for a space for your dentist. It's a tough situation you don't want to find yourself in. Another thing with purchasing, there's something that's going to come up with leasing that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. It's called TI. TI stands for tenant improvement. A lot of people think tenant improvement only pops up in rental and lease agreements, but it can also pop up in a purchase. especially if it's a purchase of, say, a condo in an existing building. What a lot of sellers would do is they have this price floor, if you will, that they don't want to go below. Let's say hypothetically it's $30 a square foot. If everybody is paying $30 a square foot and they sell one of the condos to someone for $20 a square foot, then everyone is going to comp and want to do $20 a square foot. It puts the seller in a tough spot. But what the seller can do to make the let's say the sale more attractive to the buyer is, if it's $30 a square foot on the deal, they can offer $10 a square foot in tenant improvement towards your build out and your construction. So as far as the books show, it's $30 a square foot like everyone else's purchase agreement, but you also get $10 of a square foot in construction fees or construction and design, whatever you want to. Usually it's not soft costs, it's only hard costs that you can use. So that's kind of how TI works in purchasing. And anything that I'm talking about at the end here, by the way, guys, anyone who wants to reach out to me afterwards, I'm kind of going fast on some of these things. I just want to make sure we get as much information as possible in a lot of time slot. So leasing and TI. Leasing is what 90% of dentists would do across the United States. If you're looking to do your first or your second, if you're second, you've already probably got experience in leasing. First, be prepared. It's what 90% of dentists do across the United States. A lease, in layman's, it's basically, most of us at this point know what a lease is. Standard lease for a dental office, from what I see across the United States, is 10 plus 5. What that means is a 10-year lease you're locked into with a 5-year option. Most landlords who know dentists or are smart enough to understand dental office will work with you because they know dental offices have a 1% failure rate. And if you're a landlord, if I'm the building owner, I'd want a dentist in there if I could, just because I know it's guaranteed 15 years of lease right then and there. So generally speaking, you're looking at a 10-year lease with a 5-year option. Again, commercial real estate is customizable. You guys want to do more lease to get the possibly, if you want to do a 20-year lease to see if the management company is willing to bring the lease per square foot down, by all means. If you want to do a shorter lease because you're not sure of the space, landlord might increase the rate. So commercial, again, goes right back to what I said. Commercial real estate is customizable. So what is TI in the lease world? We talked about it a little bit in the construction world, in the purchase world, but what is TI in the lease world? TI stands for tenant improvement. Ideally, it's what a building owner or a management company wants to provide to you to upgrade the space, because you're leasing the space, and if you're upgrading the space when you're out of the lease, they can lease it as is. So it's a tenant improvement, the tenant being you, but it's an improvement of the space being owned by the building. One major mistake a lot of people make, and I get this question all the time. I'm not even a real estate agent. I don't pretend to be a real estate agent, but a lot of people, I guess, enjoy confiding in their architectural teams. So a lot of people say to me, Sasha, the building's only offering me $40 a square foot. Should I go for more, 50, 60? Here's the thing about TI, guys. TI, and I have it in a bullet point there, is not free money. TI is money that you're going to pay for one way or the other. You might get $200 a square foot of TI, but guess what? Your lease is going to be higher because that management company is going to make more on the back end. They've got to increase the lease rate. Ideally, you want to find first of all, you want to have an expert broker or real estate agent who understands dentistry and understands negotiations, because commercial real estate is customizable. So you want them to understand your needs and the needs of the management company to find a nice happy medium of TI versus lease. Because obviously, if you go too low in TI, you're on the hook for $450,000 to $550,000 build out of a brand new dental office. But if you go too high in a TI, they're going to slide it into your lease rate. And leases, generally increase at a 3%, a 3% increase. So if you have a 3% increase on a $5 a square foot more space, you're going to be paying a lot more in lease than somebody who was right next to you and took a lot more in tenant improvement. So just what I want you guys to take away from this is TI. It's wonderful. It's a great option to help with some of the hard costs of construction, but you should have a specialist representing you who understands and can find a happy median between lease, something you're comfortable with your yearly amount, and TI. Because if it's me, personally, I'd rather, if I have to pay a little bit more, but ultimately save more on the back end at the end of my lease, for me, that makes more sense. But again, commercial leases are customizable. Best thing you can do is make sure you have a broker or a real estate agent who understands dentistry, who understands commercial leases, representing you. So moving on. Know your space and what affects construction costs and construction. So in these next few slides, this is going to be focused on people who are looking at, or doctors who are looking at new spaces, who don't know where to begin, or let's say they find an attractive space, but they don't know if it's a good space, if it's going to cost a lot. First thing with this floor plan, the reason I've actually put this floor plan on here is this is a 1,200 square foot office, of an office that was actually built. A lot of people say, how many ops can I get into X square feet? What square footage should I be looking for, Sasha, if I want 6 ops? I wish I could tell you guys there's exact numbers. There's a graph I've got sitting in my wall in my office where I can say 1,500 square feet gets you 6. But the issue with architecture design is, if in this case, let's use this example right here, what this doctor did. So this is a 1,200 square foot office. If you would have told me you got 5 ops in a 1,200 square foot office, I with one being a closed operatory used for extractions and minor surgery, I would be interested to see the space. The reason this space works is it's a perfect rectangle without any columns in the space. What I mean is, if you have a 3,000 square foot space and you've got columns all throughout the space, you might only also get 5 ops. That's the problem. A lot of people say, well, my friend has a 1,500 square foot office and they have 6 chairs. Why is my floor plan ending up only in 5? It's not because me or whoever is doing your floor plan for you is bad at floor plan design. It's because there are things that affect the shape and what you can do within the space. There are window lines, there are areas you can't drill. That's a big thing I run into all the time. Everyone wants to put ops on the window lines, but sometimes you have buildings with overhangs. Sometimes you've got buildings where you've got a bank or something below and you can't drill. So keep that in mind. There is no exact number per operatory. The best thing you can do, there are firms like us and others around the United States, I know they exist, who can do a preliminary test fit, whether it be for a charge or for free, just so you guys, it's totally worth it, just so you guys get an idea. Like in this case, a 1,200 square foot preliminary test fit, it's probably going to run you $400 or $500. Also, a lot of management companies, when they're trying to get you into a lease or even trying to sell a space, they may have their in-house architect or their architect on retainer provide you with a free test fit. There's a lot of options out there, but you're going to want to see a test fit before you get excited about any space. So the different types of buildings you can either lease, or spaces, excuse me, you're going to buy one of these buildings, that'd be amazing though. Different types of spaces you're going to purchase or lease. I'm going to kind of go through each of them. And if anyone has questions about anything specific, please, again, feel free to email me at the end. Class A office building, let's start there. That's what everyone's used to, everyone's seen. That's the most common space. A Class A office building is exactly what this image shows. It's a multi-story commercial building that's already been prepared for leases. For the spaces are prepared for leases. Of the 4 that you guys see here that I'm going to go over, lease-wise, this is Class A office building is generally going to be your lowest per square foot leased. Here's the reason why. 1, you don't get a lot of, it's hard for people to find you. You're not going to get it's very rare to get a sign. Even in this image, you see one, there's a sign right here. Usually the people that get the signs, the building is willing to even allow them to have signs, are the ones that either rent half the floor or most of the floor. And because they're paying that much, they're allowed to get signs. It's extremely rare to get a sign outside of a Class A office building like this, which is unfortunate because signage tells people you're there. 2, finding you, I mean, you're in a sea, just imagine, you're in a sea of offices. The only way people can kind of know where you are is you've got that, a lot of lobbies have cool monitors now, but back in the day, they had the board with the little symbols on it that say, Office A, so-and-so, Office B, so-and-so. Now they've got cool monitors where you can search, but you're basically lost in a sea of buildings and lost in a sea of spaces. And most of the time in a Class A office building, especially one that's in a great medical location, a great dental location, you're going to have probably multiple dentists in the same building. Something I want to say about that though, because a lot of dentists say, I love this building and it's in a great location, but there's two other dentists in the same building. Obviously, we don't want to be we want to have some space between dentists. Obviously, I get it. But you want to go back to your demographics and your population. If you see there are 10 new subdivisions of homes and there are 10,000 families that are coming to the neighborhood, those two dentists can't even handle the patient load. So it goes back to knowing your demographic, knowing your space. It's not always the end of the world that you're next to a dentist. It's unfortunate. I wish every dentist could have their own building that and no competition could come in there. But just with a Class A office building, that's going to be very unlikely. Benefits being the spaces are usually prepared. So they'll have the drywall on the walls, some sort of power, unless it's a brand new building. We'll talk about that in a second. Some sort of power and some sort of HVAC. Best thing you can do is just make sure your specialist, your GC, your architect checks the space out for you, make sure it's adequate for your needs. In the event that it's a brand new building, we see this a lot in the South, Texas. We see like brand new buildings popping up in areas. Anytime it's a brand new building, you're probably going to, again, just get an empty shell. And on the next few slides after this screen, I'm going to talk about what an empty shell means and what you're not getting and what you are getting. But we'll get to that in a second. The next one, so Class A office building, cheapest leases, worst location. Multifamily with retail on the ground level. So this is basically apartment buildings, hundreds of apartment buildings above, with a one-story retail center below, which in this image are these. And usually what these large apartment buildings will do is they'll try to get one large company in here, if ideally like a supermarket, Whole Foods, something like that, and they'll dedicate the rest of the spaces to things, businesses that they think would make A, their renters, their apartment renters happy, and B, bring a lot of foot traffic to the area, which brings one of the cons to this. So one of the cons is these apartment groups don't necessarily want a dentist on the ground floor, which doesn't make sense. If I'm living in an apartment and my dentist is right downstairs, I'm thrilled. I'm going to that person no matter what, because it's too convenient to not go to them. But the way that all three of these, the town center, the traditional retail, and the retail ground level, they prefer things that provide a lot of foot traffic. They don't understand that a GP or a pedo office per se may have a ton of foot traffic. They try to focus on restaurants, Starbucks, Gold's Gyms, that sort of a thing, because they want the foot traffic. But if you can get into one of these spaces, I highly recommend it, because, I mean, look, you can just see for yourself. You've got hundreds of apartments of people directly above you. And a lot of my doctors who've been in these spaces, I've even gone with them as a fun thing where we literally will slide, hey, new dentist coming into your apartment. Here's a special deal for all the all the tenants in the building. Come see me for X, Y, or Z. And the building, and as long as you get approval from the apartment group, you can slide them right under each one of the doors, have the apartment group hand them out, have them at the front desk, that sort of a thing. And you're basically guaranteed the patients of that building, unless they've got a pre-existing doctor, a dentist, and they just don't want to change, which is obvious. You're never guaranteed 100% of the entire building. Usually with a retail space, and this factors for all three of these retails, I might say it twice, but with a retail space, first, you only get windows in the front. So you're going to have windows at your entrance, and on the right side and the left side of the door, and that's it for windows. Then you've got this long, pretty thin, usually about 20, 25 feet wide, thin corridor where you've got your ops on one side and then your sterilization, admin, and everything on the other side. So you don't really get windows. A good designer can make it work. These spaces are very attractive. I don't want you guys to think just because there's no windows you shouldn't go in the space, but that's one of the cons. Usually with a retail center, any of these retail centers, the lease is going to be significantly higher than, say, somewhere in a Class A office building, unless if you're on a ground floor of a Class A office building with your own entrance. The lease is going to be significantly more. You also have common areas. You don't have common areas with these, where you would have a common area with the Class A office building. What a common area means is the hallways, the elevators, the restrooms in the hallway, the drinking fountain in the hallway, and the mop sink, which is just a ground sink that the janitor uses for their mop, is in the common area. With it being in the common area, you don't have to worry about putting it in your space. With these three retail options, because a common area doesn't exist aside from a sidewalk out front and a parking lot, you're on the hook for making sure you've got restrooms, Most of the time, you'll need two, not necessarily a men's and women, but two restrooms for the occupancy load of a standard dental office, unless it's a small office. 1,000 square feet and below, you can usually get away with one restroom. You're going to have a mop sink and a drinking fountain. This is a fun question I get a lot. You guys are probably thinking, it instead of a drinking fountain, can I just put in one of those cool water coolers that are cleaner, that are more safe anyways? No, because the county needs you to pay your sewage fee, so they want a hard-lined, specific type of drinking fountain, and there's no way around it. You must have it. It has to be accessible to patients as well as staff. So, pros, lots of people living right above you and around you. Usually it's a very bustling area. Cons, it's going to be very expensive. I don't want to say very expensive, but it's going to be expensive, more expensive for construction, and leases tend to be higher. Next, we've got the town center office over retail. This is my personal favorite, the space that I try to put a lot of my orthos and pedos into, and even GPs. So basically, what that is you've got these town centers, and I'm sure you guys have all seen them, where you've got these ground floor main stores. You might have a bar, you might have a Starbucks, you might have a restaurant, you might have a boutique clothing shop. Those people are paying a lot, and they'll get their signs usually here where my arrow is showing, right above these glass windows here in the glass door. What that does for the dentists who are looking on the second floor lease is significantly less because it's less attractive real estate than ground floor. A Starbucks is not going to be up here. They're going to play the premium to be on the first floor. What that does for the dentists and specialists is you get all of that. Basically, this is what I tell people. You get all that marketing and that foot traffic. Starbucks is a billion-dollar company. They are going to do their research for you. Let them do the marketing for you. You see a Starbucks is coming into a space here, and you can get the space right above. Think of it this way. Starbucks' marketing team just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars researching that area, and they see a profitable location for $3 to $4 a cup of coffee a person. So if they've done that marketing and they've done those logistics, you know you're going to do well. So if you can get above them, you can also usually get a sign up here too, above your windows. If you can get above them, you get the foot traffic that these major companies bring. You get the parkings, you get the busy summer days, you get the people just driving through, seeing your signage, knowing there's a dentist there, while paying significantly less for rent. Just like the other retail, you're probably, unless you're in the corner here, you're probably not going to have two sides of windows. You're also going to be on the hook for your mop sink, restrooms, and drinking fountain. So similar to this, but this is my favorite, and the main reason my favorite is because you get everything of a ground floor retail space, all the foot traffic and all that, but you pay significantly less being on the second floor. And these second floor retail centers have their own accesses with stairways and elevators, so your patients can easily find you, and they can utilize the large parking lots that these places usually have to get to you. And then finally, the traditional retail center. This tends to be a favorite for a lot of brokers and real estate agents, and it's obvious why. You get great signage. Usually, when you're in a retail center like this, a supermarket giant will be there. So, for example, there might be a Target, there might be a Wegmans, Whole Foods, whatever, who gets the initial lease and usually signs a 50-year lease in that space, or a 30 to 50-year lease in that space. Those type of businesses bring a lot of people and families and all that. If you can just be somewhere in the shopping center with a big sign like this UPS store or Kirkpatrick, which I think was a bar, you're going to get your sign right here. People are going to know you're there. People are going to be at that shopping center. If I'm dad and I have a pedo who's there, and I can maybe drop my pedo off, wait for the doctor to take him back, and then go run over to the Whole Foods, grab a couple groceries, and return. That's an ideal scenario. And also, if you're a pedo or even an ortho, you might get lucky and line up next to like a dojo, a karate dojo, or any number of things. So the cons of a traditional retail center are the same as the others. Leases are going to be high because it's premium real estate. You're not going to get windows. These are the only windows up front. You're going to be on the hook for mop sinks, drinking fountains, and restrooms, which means your construction is going to be a little bit higher. But the big pro is the location, the signage. Your location signage has already done most of your marketing for you. Now you just need to focus on a good website, good SEO, which is search engine optimization, basically just making sure your web page shows up on the first page of Google when people are searching for dental office, and you're in good shape. So let's talk about the spaces within these buildings. Vanilla box. This is a term you're going to hear from brokers. The term vanilla box is what you're typically going to see in a Class A office building. This is a box with drywall on the walls. It's usually heated, and it usually has some amount of power. So when I see it, when I'm going into a space, when I see a vanilla box, the things that I know are, okay, there's going to be a little bit of HVAC. What type of HVAC? What that means is, a lot of people say, well, the place has power and it has HVAC. Aren't I good, Sasha? No. You might have enough HVAC for a bunch of open space where there, let's say a telecom company was using cubicles. In that case, it works. But in a 6-operatory office with, reception, waiting area, consultations, restrooms, waiting or break rooms, you're going to need a lot more power to HVAC. So in a vanilla box, you want to look for the HVAC, how much is provided. Electrical, obviously this vanilla box is going to be powered. You can actually see in this image there are lights in the ceiling. If you don't see a panel in the space, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that last slide, if you don't see a panel in the space, that's usually a bad sign. It's rare that the hallway main panel, which is powering these lights and the plugs, is going to be enough for the needs of a multi-operatory dental practice. So vanilla box just means drywall on the walls are done. There's some sort of heating and air conditioning and power available to the space. So with it being having some HVAC and some electrical, and even the drywall on the walls here will bring your construction costs down, because otherwise you're going to be on the hook for all these things from point zero. What I mean by point zero is if you have one small HVAC system and it's not enough, we might have to just add a supplemental system versus adding 2 systems to start with. So the cost is in half for HVAC. Cold dark shell. This is what you're going to see in you might see this in any of the retail centers that I mentioned. A cold dark shell is basically a big empty space that they've created, and whomever is going into the space and is going to be renting the space is on the hook for the mising walls, which are the perimeter walls. Let me go back. Those are these walls, perimeter walls. So let's say these columns separate the rooms, and you're going to be a dental dentist right here. So you're going to make the hook for the drywall here and the framing and the drywall here. Usually with the ground floor cold dark shell, you're going to, if you are ground floor like this, you're going to have unfinished concrete like this. They do this strategically. It's not to be cheap. It's because over here is going to be the clean out and the sewage tap-in lines. So they know you're going to be tearing it up anyways to connect all your water and sewage lines. So that's the purpose for this. So cold dark shell has no HVAC, no electrical, and no drywall. So construction-wise, this is your highest construction cost. But with a cold dark shell, it's a blank slate. It's a blank page. You get to make it yours. You get to do what you want to do to make sure it fits the needs of your dental office and that you're happy at the end of the day. So that's what a cold dark shell is. A warm dark shell is very similar. The main difference is it's got HVAC, some sort of HVAC system. Here you can actually see it. This is the main duct line, and this is an HVAC system. A lot of times, again, with a warm dark shell, it's the basics of what that space would need. It's very rare that it's got enough HVAC, CFMs, remember that word. It's enough CFMs for a dental office. So a lot of times we're forced to add a second or third unit depending on the square footage and the floor plan of the space. And then second generation. This pops up more often than the others, I would say. Second generation is anytime you find, not a second generation dental office, a second generation office in general. So anytime you find a space and it needs a little bit of demo and to be cleared out, that's a second generation. So here's an example. You find a retail space and it used to be a UPS store, and the UPS store moved. So there are some walls and some stuff that needs to be demoed. Usually, again with this, you're going to have electrical because there was a space in there, and you're going to have HVAC. You just want to make sure the expert who's checking your space or an expert confirms that it's good for the needs of your dental office. One big question I get all the time with second generation, I get this any doctor who's looking at buying a space with walls. Sasha, if I'm able to keep the walls in their location or even reuse elements like the ceiling and the lighting, how much would it save me in cost? Here's the thing, guys. Demoing a 2,500 or 3,500 square foot space, you're looking at $3,000 to $5,000. Never compromise patient flow to save $3,000 to $5,000. Drywall is the cheapest material. It's the one area that, if we're going to have a lot of rooms, the cost isn't going to be as incredible as having a ton of sinks. What I mean is, of course you can save walls and you'll save a few thousand, but patient flow is much more critical. I can't stress enough how many doctors have been like, well, Sasha, I want to keep this restroom. It doesn't make sense that it's all the way in the back, but it'll save me costs. Yes, it absolutely will save you costs. I'm not denying that, but don't sacrifice patient flow, patient comfort, and staff flow to save a few grand. It's never worth it. So if you're looking at an office that existed and you're thinking about, is it worth it to keep 3 or 4 walls? Just remember, it takes a few grand to demo a whole space and clear it out and make it a shell. Don't compromise your patient flow for a few grand. So those are the spaces. And again, if anyone has questions, please reach out to me. I know I kind of went through them quick, and I can go into more detail about them afterwards, later on. So what do I look for? What does a contractor, a competent contractor, look for when they do a site visit? So I kept mentioning earlier in this presentation how get an expert or someone like me to come look at the space. This is the actual building sheet, building study that we print and we take to the site with every, whether it's a first gen or second generation, a cold dark shell, warm shell, whatever it is, retail center. A good contractor should fill something like this out to know what to look for. But what I've done is I've actually highlighted, and I can send a copy of this image to anyone afterwards looking at spaces and wants to try to do it on their own, of the things that are critical to timeline, delays, and construction costs, as well as even architectural fees. So let's start. I'm going to go through them really quickly. Square footage. Obviously, that's huge. I mean, the 2,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet is the average, but you're going to see it significant. So make sure you know the square foot. Stopping there for a second. When you are leasing a space, there is something called rentable square foot, and there's something called usable square foot. This is a misconception. It's something that trips up doctors all the time. Just because you're renting 2,000 square feet, especially in something with common areas, such as a Class A office building, hope you guys remember that. That's that multi-story commercial building. Your rentable square footage has something called a core factor. Core factor is the amount you're paying in your rent for those common areas I mentioned. So you're paying for the hallway of use, the elevator use, the restroom use, the drinking fountain use. It's usually a percentage and can be anywhere from 12 to 18%. Commercial real estate is customizable, so it just depends on the building and what you agree with in negotiations. So if something is 2,000 square feet rentable, it's very likely going to be 1,600 to 1,700 square foot usable. This trips up people all the time, and they get concerned, and they're like, whoa, Sasha, my lease is 2,000. I think you've made a mistake. I haven't made a mistake. I'm focusing on what's actually usable, which is what's inside of your space, not what's around your space. So keep that in mind. Location floor. This matters greatly. If you're on the ground floor with nothing beneath you, you're gonna to do the plumbing and the lines requires something called saw cutting. Imagine a big saw cutting up all the concrete, tearing it all up to dirt, running the lines, repouring concrete. If you're on any other floor, second, third, or you're on a first floor with a basement below, it's going to be something called core drilling, which actually tends to be a little bit cheaper. Just imagine these 6 to 8 inch core drill, the diameter holes, and we core drill anywhere that there's going to be plumbing, air, vacuum. It's not just for sinks. Your chairs will have a core drill because we have to have, if you have a delivery system on the chair and a system delivery on a chair, we have to core drill for those holes. So if you're on a second or third floor, the location matters because we need to know if it's going to be a core drill or a saw cut. Also, the location matters for another critical reason. Anytime you're looking in a building that has a bank, a government facility such as a SCIF is not necessarily a government facility, but a SCIF is a network of servers located in one location that pings for major corporations. These are all secured places. If you see a bank, government facility, SCIF, that's a big red flag. You're likely going to be on the hook for management fees. You might not be able to drill. I had a situation where a doctor found the space, was thrilled about it, brought me in, and then we couldn't move forward because we would be drilling right above the vault of the bank. If we were clever bank robbers, that would have been a good loophole. But obviously the bank didn't allow it, and you can't just drill through the top of bank vault. So keep that in mind with location and floor. What's in the building matters as much as what's in the space. Type of building. So the reason that's important is you just want to know if it's 5-story, 6-story commercial building. If it's this happened for me one time in northern Florida, where a doctor had purchased a house and gotten the rights to convert it for commercial use. So type of building, you just want to know what kind of building. Year built. This matters for you as much as it matters for the contractor. So older buildings, pretty much I tell doctors, anything pre-1990 or pre-2000, let's stick with that. Anything pre-2000, there's a possibility we might run into certain issues, such as asbestos. Even if there is no asbestos and they've told you they've cleared it out, you need to make sure that there's an asbestos abatement certification proving that it's been removed in it, or it's been tested and there's no asbestos. You might run into lead paint. One of my big clients, Howard University, we're redoing their dental school, and the school just happens to be a little old, and we're running into these issues where we're concerned things might be lead and that sort of thing. But we're taking the necessary steps to remove it, and it can be removed. But again, that's going to be additional costs for you. So if you're looking at a building from the mid 80s, there's a possibility that either it might have asbestos, it might have had asbestos, and you're going to need to get someone to test it to ensure that there isn't any left, because you won't be able to get permits and inspections without these certifications. So year built, pretty important. Number of stories. This is important, not as important for you to know, but it is important. Reason being, if you're on the second floor, you're going to have something called a dental vent. Vacuum and compressors have to vent out all those fun smells and everything we're sucking through the vacuum. You can't vent those out the side of a building if the windows can open, or for whatever reason the code doesn't allow it, the management company allows it. And if you're on the second floor of a 10-story building, all of a sudden you're going to have to run a line 8 stories above you to the 10th floor, 8 stories above you to the 10th floor, and vent out the roof. That's going to be costly. So if you're on the top floor, that's not something you have to worry about, but just keep that in mind. It's an example of what can go wrong. Post-tension. This comes up all the time. Any space anyone looks at that's not in a retail center, any multi-story building, any floor you're looking at, just ask them straight up, is this a post-tension building? If they say yes, you cannot put a dental office in there. Comes up more often than I want to admit, but I'd say about 20% of the, not less than that, 15% of the time it pops up. So just make sure you ask straight up. Considering this space, is this post-tension? The building will tell you yes or no. Common area restrooms. You need to know that if there are no common area restrooms, you're going to be on the hook for paying for and having them in the space. So kind of a double whammy. 1, you have to pay for them. 2, you're losing space that could be potentially operatory space for a restroom. Common area drinking fountain, same deal. Tenant space, the next highlighted on the right side. Circle 1, shell condition, light demo. Basically, you need to know this because the amount of demo affects the cost. Earlier, I mentioned anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000. Hopefully, you guys remember I said don't sacrifice patient flow for $3,000 to $5,000, but you still want to know if it's heavy demo. I'll give you an example. I mentioned the bank earlier. We once had to demo a bank, and what people don't realize is the safe is one giant unit that's inside of the building. You have to tear all the walls off the safe and drop them and pull and basically remove the front of the space, remove this giant safe, and then return the front of the building to its original position. So that's a lot of heavy demo. That's a lot of cost. That's going to be more than $3,000 to $5,000. That's going to be $10,000 to $12,000. An example of why you need to know that. Fire alarm, you need to know it affects your cost. We look for it because we know the drawings are going to be affected by it, and the construction cost is going to be affected by it. Same thing with sprinklers. You see sprinklers, you're going to, even if the space you're looking at doesn't have sprinklers, if the common area or any common space in the building has sprinklers, the county and the fire inspector will require you to have sprinklers in your space as well. Looks like common area restroom is on there twice, but you can ignore that. Common area foundation, ADA. Actually, no, it makes sense. It's ADA. So what it means by ADA is American Disabilities Act. ADA is you have to have certain, where it says, for example, it says common area foundation ADA. If there's a step up, if somebody with a wheelchair can't easily get into the building or into your space, that's a big red flag because there might be needs for a ramp. There might be needs for a lift. We want to make sure that anyone with a wheelchair can easily access the building. 1, you want your patients to be comfortable and be able to get to you easily, and 2, you want everyone to have the same opportunity. So electrical panel available in space. This one is critical. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about vanilla space, vanilla shell versus cold dark shell. If you don't see an electrical panel in your space, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't go into space. It just means you need to find out from either the broker or the management company exactly how many amps, 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 they are going to be dedicating to you and your space. Generally speaking, again, this is general, it's customizable. I try to look for 200 amps, not watts. Guys, 200 watts is nothing. 200 amps of power to the space. If there isn't a sub panel, but they're guaranteeing that there's 200 amps available for the space, no problem. Your contractor can run a sub panel from the main panel on that floor to your space. Obviously, there are costs associated with that, running the panel, but you want to make sure that they're going to offer you 200 amps. And then the electrical closet location, that matters because it's something called a home run, we call in the construction world. But basically, if your home run is very far, I've got a client actually right now where they're on the second floor of one corner of the building, and then the main electrical room is on the way opposite side of the land on the ground floor of the garage. It's $12,000 to $14,000 just to run those electrical lines. So the distance matters, everyone. Generally speaking, it's going to be on the same floor. You're going to be between 10 linear feet to 50 linear feet. Just keep that in mind. Transformer needed. A transformer, you guys might hear of this. You might have some in your neighborhoods. You might have just heard it, not even know what it is. A transformer is all it does is whenever power is brought to a building, brought to a main electrical pole, brought to the beginning of a subdevelopment, it's something called high voltage power. A transformer transforms the high voltage power into what we use, low voltage power. Those are the plugs on your wall. Those are what your lights run off of. Those are your switches. What you're plugging your cell phone into charge, what your laptop, those plugs are all low voltage. So if this building is only having high voltage come to it, and it's already being transformed into low voltage, you may be on the hook to pay for a transformer, which is $5,000 to $8,000 for the transformer installed, for the transformer as well as installation in your space. Also, it takes up space, so double whammy again. You have to pay for it and it takes up space. Mechanical and plumbing, mechanical being your HVAC. Your HVAC type, I mentioned it a few times before, matters significantly. On our sheet, it says split system, VAV, water source. It's not really important that you guys know what type of system. It does matter, so the general contractor or the architect should check, but you want to make sure that there are units available and that your specialist, your architect, your general contractor, sometimes, very rarely, your broker, agree that it's going to be enough CFMs for the potential space, for the potential office you're trying to build. System operational, that's obvious. If you go into a space, and this has happened to me, and I had a situation where looters had ripped out all of the HVAC systems, actually have platinum inside, and they've ripped out all the platinum, so the system was no longer operational. It can happen. Just make sure that it works, test it, have them test it, all that fun stuff. Known asbestos, if you're an older building, I mentioned asbestos, lead, and hazardous materials. So you're pre-2000, these are things you have to possibly consider and might pop up for you. So, for example, it's on our sheet, so we check for it, we ask for it when we're there. If we see any signs of it, obviously, not everyone's going to be an expert and know what asbestos looks like. That's not the point. For your knowledge, just know that if you're pre-2000, you're going to want some confirmation that these items aren't in your space. Plus, nobody wants to work in a space with asbestos and all that nasty stuff. So that's it for our presentation. I kind of hit a little bit on each area, but I wanted everyone to know we're going to be doing more presentations, focusing more on leases, focusing more on construction and the build-out process, the architecture and the design process. The focus of today was just really finding the right space and knowing what to look for, and hopefully I've given you enough information to just at least be dangerous while you're out there. This last page just has our contact info. Again, please email us, call us, just ask for Sasha. Sasha spelled S-A-S-H-A, and I can answer any of your questions anytime. Well, I appreciate your guys' time. Stay safe out there, stay healthy out there. Look forward to speaking with you guys again. Thanks.